Seeing none, I will accept the motion on resolution 2019-7 and the interlocal cooperation agreement that is attached.
So moved.
There's a motion to approve resolution 2019-7. Is there a second?
Second.
There's a second. Any additional questions or discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, aye?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstention, motion passes. Yeah. The interlocal. Because that also has a signature on it. Doesn't it?
Yeah, when you can sign it now if you want. That way we don't have to get it later.
Right.
Don gonna sign these.
No, I guess you could. I'm sorry.
Or test.
Yeah, I saw the test. I didn't see his name, so okay. Under a test. We're gonna rename you,
Okay.
Mr. Attest. Anything else on that project, Chelsea?
Not this time.
Thank you, sir. Next item on the agenda, Mooresville Industrial Park. Chelsea?
So up first, for the shell building, you have in your packet a copy of the SB1. That is a statement of benefits. This is something that that entities will file with the town or whoever their governmental body is to file for tax abatement. So again, what you have before you is a statement of benefits for requesting a tax abatement from the town of Mooresville for an abatement on our shell building. I'm going to talk a little bit about the process of this so that it's clear. What we're trying to do here is essentially provide the benefit to the end user, and we don't know who the end user is yet. Statutorily, you must file for the tax abatement prior to breaking ground, which is why we're doing that now. So it's my request, I guess, that you provide your blessing. I don't know if this really needs to be in the form of a motion, that I may file this with the town to seek a tax abatement for the shell building, which will ultimately be passed on to the end user. And that is just for real property, as there is no personal property going into this building.
Do you want to explain how an abatement works? For those who may be listening on your phone.
Actually, we're all up and running now.
Oh, okay. Then why don't you go ahead and explain the abatement?
Technical difficulties. So an abatement essentially phases in the property taxes. So there's a matrix that the town uses, and I may put our economic development director on the spot if he wants to chime in on this. There's an abatement matrix that the town uses based off of the type of industry it is, types of jobs, the number of jobs, and the investment numbers. If it's an existing company, I believe they get some additional points as well. And then that plugs into an equation of how long the abatement would be. And again, that is essentially phasing in property taxes. Typically, it would be, it's often like 100% first year abated, and then 90%, and then 80%, until you get to paying your full property taxes. That's what's done at the corporate level.
I think,
explanation on.
I think one of the important things to note here is that the taxing units, other than the redevelopment commission, will continue to receive the same amount of taxes that they are receiving now on the land. So there's no impact on those other taxing units. And the taxes that will be paid by the end user of that building are actually revenues that the redevelopment commission would be foregoing, and not any other taxing units. So, and if we own the building for a while and we have to pay taxes on it, we're actually paying taxes to ourselves.
Correct.
And we would capture those taxes. And then when the end user comes in, if we forego any of the revenue from those taxes being paid through an abatement, those are revenues that the redevelopment commission is foregoing, and not any other taxing unit. So I did want to point that out.
Thank you.
This is a first step that is required. The town council, and legal, you can correct me if I'm wrong, town council would do a declaratory resolution, and then a public hearing would be held a minimum of 10 days, or at least 10 days after that, where they would hold a public hearing for the tax abatement, and then if they so chose, then would act on a confirmatory resolution on the tax abatement. So this is just initiating the process that we will provide the application to the town, and then the town will go through their legal process in order to consider it. Are there any questions? Yes, Dr. Moore.
So the abatement schedule within the TIF district, the abatement is really the amount that the RDC would achieve. The TIF district will remain the same for the taxing units as it is.
That's correct.
now. And then the RDC also would not be getting anything except what the abatement schedule would allow, 100% abated, 90% abated.
Right.
And probably a 10-year schedule.
Right.
Which
Yep.
is the way abatement schedules normally work.
Right.
So really, nobody's going to gain tax money off of this initially, but that would be good as an economic incentive, is what
Right.
you're saying.
Right.
That's correct?
That's correct.
Year two, you will start to see benefit.
The-
Year one will be 100% abatement, year two will be, you'll get
Well,
about 5%.
the redevelopment commission would see that benefit,
Yeah.
because it's the abatement is on the improvements on the real property, so it's on the building itself.
Just on that.
So now, depending on what would happen in the future, once a tenant came in, that the taxing units would derive tax benefit from the personal property taxes that would be paid. Because at this point in time, the redevelopment commission is not capturing the personal property taxes. So, for example, if a company came in and put $50 million worth of equipment in the building, all of the taxing units would receive benefit from that $50 million of investment in personal property.
Personal property.
Right. So, you know,
And it would be within our purview to abate the personal property too,
Correct.
but we don't.
it's in the town's purview, it's not in our purview.
Okay.
The town council does that. Redevelopment commission has no role in providing that tax abatement.
And we don't think the town would do that.
Actually, I would suggest do that based upon that as an incentive, the town likely would give an abatement on personal property.
On personal property also.
And I would assume that they would too, but again, that's the town council decision of whether or not to provide that, and they will make that decision based on the criteria that they establish.
We have those in place now, don't we?
We do.
With other companies?
The town does, yes.
That's what I mean.
Yeah, the town has a matrix which they currently utilize to determine what those abatements could be. It's a policy, it's not an ordinance, so they have flexibility within that matrix and whether to utilize it or not,
Each case.
each case.
Yeah, thank you.
Along that same vein, I'll just add, I want to be clear that for the purposes of this tax abatement, that the redevelopment commission is acting as the applicant, that no decisions are being made by the redevelopment commission. This still has to go before the town council, as they're the ones that ultimately decide whether things are abated. So I just want to be clear that we're the applicant, we're not saying this is abated. don't have that authority.
In a similar vein, I mean, we're just acting at, our role in this is not really necessarily as the redevelopment commission, but it is as the owner of the property.
Developer of the project.
Yes, the developer of the project. There's nothing special about this that's different from other tax abatements for other property owned by different developers.
Any questions? Is there a motion to approve submission of the tax abatement, SB1, to the town council for consideration?
I move to approve the submission to council for abatement.
There's a motion to approve the submission of the SB1 for consideration to the town council. Is there a second?
Second.
There's a second. Any additional discussion or questions? Seeing none, all in favor, aye? Aye. Opposed? Abstention? Motion passes. Is there anything else regarding the industrial park?
Two more things I wanted to discuss. One, I wanted to go a little bit further into the financing of the Shell building. A few of the specifics that I want to make sure are out there is the terms on the financing. It is a 20-year loan. We had closed on the financing in September, which we talked about at our last meeting. So essentially, we are under contract with Runabaum Construction, Greg Martz, and First Merchants Bank. Again, 20-year loan. The first 3 years are interest-only payments. I also want to note that there's a draw period. So if we're not constructing anything when our first payment is due, it's just based on what we have drawn down from a construction standpoint. Right now, it's looking like the timeline might be pushed a bit, which may make more of a spring start, a mid-summer completion. Our first payment is due in January. That's looking it's going to be a very low dollar amount right now. At most, it's expected our year one interest payments would be $150,000. The goal ultimately, and we've talked about this I think for years, I know I have, the goal ultimately is to sell this as quickly as possible to an end user. Part of this is marketing. Countywide, we have no inventory. We have not had inventory for a very long time. When I started at the EDC in 2013, we had no inventory. I wasn't the first EDC director at that time to say we have no inventory and we need a building. I know it's a problem that Mike has. It's not, there's no end in sight, so we needed to build a building. It was $4,175,000 was what we financed. Could we have gone out and written a check for that with what we have on hand? Legal might actually disagree. Schematics, but do we have the cash on hand? Yes, but our goal is that this is sold soon, and that we really don't have a whole lot more into it than the land that we bought up front. Now again, we may be sitting here in 5 years having the same conversation. I hope not. I hope we're doing this again in another building, so we have more inventory, and there are more jobs and more capital investment in the communities. But I just wanted to take a few minutes to talk about financing the structure. Last thing to note is there's no prepayment penalty. So if we do sell this in a year or 6 months or whatever that looks like, we're not locked into any prepayment penalties. So we haven't necessarily done a deep dive into the financing structure, and I just wanted to take a few minutes to do that. Any questions on that?
Would you come to the microphone, please, and identify yourself? And normally we don't do this, but because of your expertise in this field, we
Well, your
will.
tax abatement application has to go across my desk, so I get that. So what you're suggesting, Chelsea, is that if we sell this building in year one, we will have only put out $148,000 if it's by the end of year one, which will recoup in the sale price anyway?
Likely, yes.
Great, thank you very much.
I will say outside of the cost of the property itself, which
But
we're
it's
looking for.
conceivable that
Yes.
the value of the building.
Yes.
All right, we normally don't have those conversations crossed, so. Just one clarification that, regarding finances,
Mhm.
that because of other parts of this project, primarily infrastructure cost, which we will hopefully bid out in November, that it would be impractical to move forward on this project in any other way than to finance it the way we have. So, because you cannot build an industrial park on county roads and expect them to handle industrial traffic. So we knew we had expenses on infrastructure that we're going to have to undertake. Therefore, there was not capital available internally to do this project, and that's why we chose to pursue the project in the way we did.
And there's a long line in the queue for the concrete anyway.
Yes, right. Okay, Chelsea, anything else?
Just to add on that, what I meant was, we're beating a dead horse, however, if you just look at our balance sheet, does it look like we can write a check for that amount of money? Yes. We can, because we have lots and lots of infrastructure projects that we're doing and other projects right now. So, to your point, no, we cannot, and that's why we decided not to. But if you look at nothing more than our balance sheet and wonder why we financed this, that's why. So, I just wanted to dive a little deeper into that. Last thing for Mooresville Industrial Park, wanted to talk a little bit about the infrastructure. I have spent a lot of time working with Bain Engineering, who is doing the design for Bethel and Merriman Road upgrades, working with property owners, working with utility companies on the design for these projects. It is our intent to bid the work in November. So we would open bids at our December meeting, and we would hold another special meeting in December to award the bid. That is for the construction of Bethel Road and Merriman Road, with the expected time frame of starting in early spring of 2024 actual construction. So it's on the horizon. It's been quite a project.
Just because I may have misheard you, but the construction to be started and completed in 2020.
Correct.
Okay. All right. Any questions for Chelsea on that? Do we still have one step to go in the final plat approval?
In the final plat,
The plat approval needs to go to
council,
town council action, and that's scheduled for their next meeting
believe so, yeah.
When was it done?
last week.
Might be the meeting after that, don't they usually have a period that they wait?
Didn't they have a meeting Tuesday?
Yes.
So I think it's,
They meet the 15th.
I think the 15th,
Okay.
yeah.
All right. Anything else on that, Chelsea?
No. Thank you.
No questions for Chelsea on that? Okay. New business. Is there any new business? Gentlemen? Seeing none? Legal.
No legal update.
Chelsea, your report.
You've really heard my report. I should probably just take this off the agenda. Been spending a lot of time on economic development projects and road design, learning all kinds of fun engineering things. Happy to answer any questions that you guys have though.
Any questions for Chelsea? See none? Claims. We have claims in the amount of $110,983.51. I believe you've had an opportunity to review those claims. Is there a motion?
Motion to approve our claims in the amount of $110,983.51.
We have a motion to approve claims. Is there a second?
Second.
There is a second. Any questions?
I need to note that that is different than, it's a write-in amount. There were two that were incorrect, so there was a $650, it was actually the change order from Banning for writing easement descriptions. She cut a check for, so that was taken off. And then there was a bill that was 6 weeks past due from Manning for design work for $60,832.14, which was added. So I wanted to make sure that was in the minutes.
All right, thank you. Any other questions or discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, aye?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstention, motion passes. For the good of the order, anything? Seeing none, our next meeting is scheduled for Thursday, November the 7th at 6 p.m. in this building. If there is need for an executive session, that will be posted and advertised. If there's nothing else, I'll accept a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn?
We are adjourned. Thank you all.
Can I get an extra copy for Chelsea?
Don't leave yet. I need you to sign.